There was a great cornfield beyond the fence, and not far away she saw a scarecrow, placed high on a pole to keep the birds from the ripe corn. Dorothy leaned her chin upon her hand and gazed thoughtfully at the scarecrow. Its head was small, a small sack stuffed with straw, with eyes and nose and mouth painted on it to represent a face. And Dorothy was surprised to see one of the eyes slowly wink at her. She thought she must have been mistaken, for Kansas scarecrows never wink, but presently it nodded to her in a friendly way. "Good day," said the scarecrow in a rather husky voice. "Did you speak?" asked the girl in wonder. "Certainly," answered the scarecrow. "How do you do?" "I'm pretty well, thank you," Dorothy replied. "How do you do?" "I'm not feeling well," said the scarecrow with a smile, "for it is very tedious being perched up here to scare away crows." "Can't you get down?" asked Dorothy. "No, for this pole is stuck up my back. If you will please take away the pole, I shall be greatly obliged to you." Dorothy lifted the figure off the pole, for being stuffed with straw it was quite light. "Thank you," he said. "Who are you, and where are you going?" "My name is Dorothy, and I am going to the Emerald City to ask the Great Oz to send me back to Kansas." "Where is the Emerald City? And who is Oz?" he inquired. "Why, don't you know?" she returned, surprised. "No, indeed, I don't know anything. You see, I'm stuffed, so I have no brains at all," he answered sadly. "Do you think, if I go to the Emerald City with you, that the Great Oz would give me some brains?" "I cannot tell," she returned, "but you may join me. If Oz won't give you any brains, you'll be no worse off than you are now." "That is true," said the Scarecrow. "You see," he continued confidently, "I don't mind my body being stuffed, because I cannot get hurt, but I do not want people to call me a fool. And if my head stays stuffed with straw instead of with brains, as yours is, how am I ever to know anything?" They walked back to the yellow brick road and started along the path for the Emerald City. Toto sniffed and growled at the Scarecrow. "Don't mind Toto," said Dorothy. "He never bites." "Oh, I'm not afraid of him. All I'm afraid of is a lighted match. Tell me about where you came from," he said as he walked. So she told him all about Kansas and how gray everything was there. The Scarecrow could not understand why she wished to leave this beautiful country and go back to the gray place called Kansas. "That is because you have no brains," answered the girl. "No matter how dreary and gray our homes are, people would rather live there than anywhere else. There is no place like home." Toward evening they came to a great forest, where the trees grew so big and close together that their branches met over the road of yellow brick and shut out the remaining daylight. They stumbled along in the darkness until the Scarecrow saw a little cottage. He led her to it, and Dorothy soon fell into a sound sleep with Toto beside her. The Scarecrow, who was never tired, stood up in a corner and waited patiently until morning came. When Dorothy awoke, the sun was shining, and Toto was already out chasing birds and squirrels. She sat up and looked around. There was the Scarecrow, still patiently waiting for her. They left the cottage and walked until they found a little spring, where Dorothy drank and bathed. Through the trees was a clearing by the roadside. There they sat down, and Dorothy opened her basket. She offered some bread to the Scarecrow, but he refused. "I am never hungry," he said, "and it is a lucky thing I am not, for my mouth is only painted, and if I should cut a hole in it so I could eat, the straw I am stuffed with would come out, and that would spoil the shape of my head." Dorothy saw at once that this was true, so she nodded and asked, "Won't you tell me a story while we are resting?" The Scarecrow looked at her reproachfully and answered, "My life has been so short, and I really know nothing whatsoever. I was only made the day before yesterday. When the farmer made my head, one of the first things he did was to paint my ears, so that I could hear what was going on. Then he painted my right eye, and as soon as it was finished, I found myself looking at him and at everything around me with a great deal of curiosity, for this was the first glimpse of the world. The farmer carried me to the cornfield and set me up on a tall stick, where you found me." Dorothy packed her basket to go, but she was startled to hear a deep groan near by. "What was that?" she asked timidly. "I can't imagine," replied the Scarecrow, "but we can go and see." They went back into the forest a few steps, then Dorothy saw standing beside one of the big trees with an axe in his hands a man entirely made of tin. He stood perfectly motionless, as if he could not stir at all. Toto barked sharply and made a snap at the tin legs, which hurt his teeth. "Did you groan?" asked Dorothy. "Yes," answered the Tin Man, "I did. I've been groaning for more than a year, and no one has ever heard me before or come to help me." "What can I do for you?" she asked. "Please get the oil can from the shelf in my cottage and oil my joints," he said. Dorothy at once did as he asked. On her return, the Tin Woodman said, "Oil my neck first." So she oiled it, and as it was quite badly rusted, the Scarecrow took hold of the tin head and moved it gently from side to side until it worked freely, and then the man could turn it himself. "Now oil my joints and my arms," he said, and Dorothy did. Finally the Tin Woodman lowered his axe. "This is a great comfort," he said. "I have been holding that axe in the air since I rusted a year ago. Now, if you will oil the joints of my legs, I'll be all right once more." "I might have stood there always if you had not come along," he said, thanking them. "How did you happen to be here?" "We are going to the Emerald City to see the Great Oz," she said. "Why do you wish to see Oz?" he asked. "I want him to send me back to Kansas, and the Scarecrow wants him to put a few brains in his head," Dorothy replied. The Tin Woodman appeared to think deeply for a moment. Then he said, "Do you suppose Oz could give me a heart?" "Why, I guess so," answered Dorothy. "It would be as easy as giving the Scarecrow brains." "Well, then, if you will allow me to join your party, I will also ask Oz to help me." "Come along," said the Scarecrow heartily, and Dorothy agreed. So the Tin Woodman shouldered his axe and asked Dorothy to put his oil can in her basket. They set out through the forest, and the Tin Woodman said, "During the year I stood there, I had time to think that the greatest loss I had ever known was the loss of my heart. Once I was in love, but the girl I loved lived with an old woman who didn't want her to marry me, so she had the Wicked Witch of the East cast a spell on me. So now I am made all of tin, and I am very lonely. No one can love who has not a heart." "All the same," said the Scarecrow, "I shall ask for brains instead of a heart, for a fool would not know what to do with a heart if he had one. Once I had brains and a heart also, so having tried them both, I should much rather have a heart," returned the Woodman, "for brains do not make one happy." Dorothy and her companions walked through the thick woods, where the yellow brick road was covered by dried branches and dead leaves. Now and then there came a deep growl from some wild animal hidden among the trees. These sounds made the little girl's heart pound. Toto walked close to her side and did not even bark in return. Suddenly there came a terrible roar, and a great lion bounded into the road. With one blow of his paw he sent the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman spinning. Toto, now that he had an enemy to face, ran barking toward the lion, and the great beast had opened his mouth to bite the dog when Dorothy, fearing Toto would be killed, and heedless of danger, rushed forward and slapped the lion on his nose as hard as she could, crying, "Don't you dare bite Toto! You ought to be ashamed of yourself, a big beast like you, to bite a poor little dog." "I didn't bite him," said the lion, rubbing his nose. "You tried to," she retorted. "You're a big coward." "I know it," said the lion, wiping a tear from his eye with the tip of his tail. "It is my great sorrow. Danger makes my heart pound. Perhaps if I had no heart, I should not be such a coward." "Have you brains?" asked the Scarecrow. "I suppose so." "I've never looked to see," replied the lion. "I'm going to the Great Oz to ask him to give me some," said the Scarecrow, "for my head is stuffed with straw." "And I'm going to ask him for a heart," said the Woodman. "And I'm going to ask him to send Toto and me back to Kansas," added Dorothy. "Do you think Oz can give me courage?" asked the Lion. "Just as easily as he could give me brains," said the Scarecrow. "Or give me a heart," said the Tin Woodman. "Or send me back to Kansas," said Dorothy. "Then if you don't mind, I'll join you," said the Cowardly Lion. "You'll be very welcome," answered Dorothy. So they set off. Soon they saw a great ditch dividing the road. They crept up to the edge to look over. It was very deep, with many big jagged rocks at the bottom, and both sides were too steep to climb down. "What shall we do?" asked Dorothy. "I think I could jump over it," said the Lion. "Good," said the Scarecrow. "You can carry us over on your back, one at a time." The Scarecrow went first. Dorothy went next. with Toto in her arms, and she climbed on the lion's back, holding tightly to his mane. The next moment she felt as if she was flying through the air, and then before she had time to think about it, she was safe on the other side. When the lion went back and got the woodman, they walked along in the sunshine, amid great clusters of scarlet poppies, which soon covered the yellow brick road. Now the odor of many poppies together is so powerful that any who breathe it fall asleep, as if not taken away from there, sleep on forever. Soon Dorothy felt she must sit down to rest and to sleep. But they would not let her do this, and kept on going until Dorothy's eyes closed and she fell among the poppies fast asleep, with Toto beside her. The Scarecrow and the Woodman, not being made of flesh, weren't troubled by the flower scent. The Scarecrow told the Lion, "Run fast and get out of this deadly flower bed quickly. We'll bring Dorothy with us, but if you should fall asleep, you are too big to be carried." So the Lion bounded forward as fast as he could. The Scarecrow and the Woodman picked up Toto and Dorothy and carried them through the great carpet of deadly flowers. They came at last upon their friend the Lion, lying fast asleep among the poppies. The flowers had been too strong for the huge beast, and he had given up at last and fallen only a short distance from the end of the poppy bed, where the grass spread in green fields before them. "We can do nothing for him," said the Woodman sadly, "for he is much too heavy to lift. We must leave him here to sleep on forever, and perhaps he will dream that he has found courage at last." "I'm sorry," said the Scarecrow. "The Lion was a good comrade for one so cowardly. But let's go on." They carried the sleeping girl to a pretty spot beside the river, far enough from the poppy field to prevent her breathing any more of the poison of the flowers. Here they laid her gently on the soft grass and waited for the fresh breeze to awaken her. As they stood beside the girl, the Woodman heard a low growl and saw a wildcat running after a little field mouse. The Woodman raised his axe and cut the cat's head off. The mouse stopped and squeaked, "Oh, thank you ever so much for saving my life. I am the queen of all of the field mice." Many field mice ran up exclaiming that they were glad to find her alive and well, and bowed deeply. "This funny tin man," she said, "saved my life, so hereafter you'll obey his every wish. Is there anything you'd like now?" "Oh, yes," said the Scarecrow. "Please save our friend the Lion, who's fallen asleep in the poppy bed." "A lion!" cried the little Queen. "Why, he would eat us all up." "Oh, no, this lion is a coward. He says so himself," answered the Scarecrow. "Please send for all of your subjects to come at once, and let each one bring a piece of string." Then the Scarecrow instructed the Woodman to chop up some trees to make a cart that would carry the lion. The mice came from all directions, and Dorothy was greatly astonished to wake and find herself surrounded by thousands of little mice looking at her timidly. But the Scarecrow explained everything, and, turning to the dignified little mouse, he said, "Permit me to introduce you to Her Majesty the Queen." Dorothy nodded bravely, and the Queen made a curtsy, after which she became quite friendly with the little girl. Then the Scarecrow and the Woodman harnessed the mice to the cart and used the string they'd brought. When all the mice had been harnessed, they were able to pull it quite easily to the place where the lion lay asleep. After much hard work, the two managed to get the lion up upon the cart. At first, the little field mice, many though they were, could hardly stir the heavily loaded cart. But with the Woodman and the Scarecrow pushing and the mice pulling, soon they rolled the lion out of the poppies to a place where he could breathe fresh air again. The Queen Mouse said, "If ever you need us again, call out to us in the field and we shall hear you and come to your aid. Goodbye." "Thank you so much, and goodbye," the friends answered, and away the Queen ran, while Dorothy held Toto tightly lest she should run after her and frighten her. Then they sat down beside the cowardly lion until he should awaken.